Yeah, sure. So thank you very
Okay.
much everyone for joining us in second session. Presenting before you Dr. Divya. It's my great pleasure to present Dr. Divya, working as associate professor in our institute, a brilliant academician, a wonderful orator, a dedicated worker. After completing her BAMS and MD from Government Ayurveda College, Tirunanthapuram, she worked for some time in Parashini Ayurveda College, Kannur, and then Ashtangam, and she is with us for the last 3 years. She is our Chief Innovative Officer, working in Dr. Krishna Life Sciences Limited and also Muniar Ayurveda Research Center. Highly trained in industry, in and out of industry. She is the right person to talk about all the challenges that we face during the quality control of Ayurvedic medicines. Please let me welcome Dr. Divya. Over to you, Divya Madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So we are starting with the session. The topic which I am taking today is the challenges and quality control of Ayurvedic medicine. I won't be talking about many technical things in detail, but in fact, I'll be speaking about a few subjects which I feel each of everyone should know as an Ayurvedic doctor. Like the technical part is different, but this is like a very peripheral view of that. With the stipulated time allowed to me, I'll be presenting before you. So as you can see, the global herbal market, some statistics I have presented here about the global herbal market. I'm not going to the details of that. So we have like 90 billion, we have a global herbal market share of 90 billion US dollar, and the rate of 10 to 15 percentage every year. Of this big market, India holds a share of only 2 percentage. We have only a share of 2 percentage in that. The major reason for the lack of quality, safety, and efficacy of herbal drugs. So when we discuss about the major aspects of quality control, we have to discuss about the raw material and of course about the finished products. Finished products already sir has discussed a few things regarding that. Murli sir has discussed a peripheral view of that, and within the stipulated time I won't be going through much details of finished products, but I'll be discussing regarding the raw materials mainly, because if raw materials is proper, like almost 70% of the quality is managed with that. So rest everything covers in the 30%, because the most important part, the most expensive part, the most important thing in the quality is raw materials. So moving on to the quality standards of raw materials, aware that we have herbs, minerals, and animal products in our Ayurvedic products. So many of us are aware about the problems pertaining to herbs, availability of herbs, like we have discussed in many platform about availability of dashamulas, availability of ashoga. So many things we have discussed in different platforms, and to an extent we know there are some problems with the herbs. But there are some materials which we don't even suspect to have a major problem with the availability or with the major problem with the quality. Like people who are connected to industries or who are working with Ayurvedic industries may be aware about that. But for others, even as a common consumer or for others as a doctor, we may not be aware about certain aspects. So I'll be starting with those material first, and then we will move on to the herbs. So this is a newspaper record which was reported by Hindu in Karnataka edition, that about a jaggery manufacturing unit raid done by the government. And in that event, many adulterants were detected. Many problems were detected in the manufacturing of jaggery. Even the problems with jaggery, we were not completely aware about the problems. See, we have read some articles, scientific papers we have seen, but the reality, how serious it is, we came to know only once we started checking the quality of jaggery for our institution use. So it was like that. It was a shocking revelation for us. After that, it was like that. We were even afraid to buy jaggery for our in-house uses. So I'll discuss with you few adulterants which is seen in jaggery. So one major thing is sodium bicarbonate. Sodium bicarbonate, whether we should call it as an adulterant or as an ingredient, it is still a matter of debate. Because to explain regarding the ingredients, the problems with jaggery, I think I should just briefly mention the process of preparation. As all of us know that comes from sugarcane juice. Sugarcane juice is concentrated, and the concentrated sugarcane juice is concentrated by the process of heating and is converted to jaggery. So many a times the sodium bicarbonate is added to remove the impurities, to add it as a clarifying agent for that. And there is no adverse effect with that because we already know we consume sodium bicarbonate along with biscuit, cakes or bread. Many bakery items which we use contains sodium bicarbonate or food soda. We use it in food. So well, it doesn't have that much serious health effect, but whether when you're using a medicine jaggery on a patient, whether it is advisable or not, that is up to the doctor. But practically, it is impossible to get a sample from market without sodium bicarbonate. So another one is calcium carbonate or lime, which is commonly used to add the color to the material. So the color, I mean, like that is also a clarifying agent. The preparation of jaggery without sodium bicarbonate or calcium carbonate, one among this is mandatory. It is impossible. But most commonly used one is sodium bicarbonate. But here in our institution, we prefer the one prepared with calcium carbonate because due to certain reasons, we feel that is a better option. This is also added as a clarifying agent to remove the impurities from jaggery. Otherwise, for, if we use it just as a clarifying agent, the concentration required is very less. That is in a 100 kg batch, 100 gram or less than 100 gram will be enough as a clarifying agent. But another use of calcium carbonate is that calcium carbonate increases the hardness of jaggery. Because if many of you may be knowing that traditionally jaggery was not these hard balls. The hard ballless form of jaggery came to market in a later stage so that the transportation of jaggery is easy. So if you put more quantity of lime, jaggery will become more hard and also it will increase the weight of the material. It will also increase the weight of the material, weight of the jaggery. So in that case, if in more quantity it is used, it acts as a pure adulterant. Otherwise, of course, in preparation to an extent, a small percentage of jaggery is required. But if it is used in that amount, it is not detectable by the normal laboratory test and it is safe also to an extent in a very small amount. So, and another ingredient which is added in the preparation is tilataila or any other form of oil. Normally, here locally people use tilataila, but other forms of oil are also there, which can just avoid sticking the jaggery to the pans. So these are the normal excipients. I don't know whether you should call it an adulterant or excipient because jaggery can be prepared without adding this material, but to get a sample from market without this materials is totally impossible. So these we can call the safe adjuvants to jaggery. Now comes the dangerous adulterants to jaggery, which include zinc formaldehyde sulfoxylate that is commonly used in textile industry. It is a harmful chemical and it is mainly added to improve the color of the jaggery. So many of you know that when we go to the market, people always demand for lighter colored jaggeries. Somehow or other, we believe lighter color, golden color jaggery has got a superior quality compared to the dark colored one. And lighter color one is expensive also. So to acquire the lighter color, traditionally prepared jaggery is mostly black in color or dark brown in color. But the lighter color versions is mostly attained by addition of these chemicals so that it look very beautiful. And these chemicals like zinc formaldehyde sulfoxylate, sodium hydrophosphate, etc. are added to provide that color to jaggery. And the risks, as you can see in the screen, acute toxicity, genetic mutagenicity, etc. are the risk because these materials are never intended to be used in the preparation of food materials. Similarly, sodium hydrophosphate is a material which is used in anti-flocculant agent in petroleum industry. Again, it is a harmful chemical which provides a bright color to jaggery. And the third option is, you can see a yellow color, which we call metanin yellow. This was also positive in many of the samples which we tested in our institution. This color is mostly added because when jaggery is prepared from excessively matured sugarcane plant, the final product, when you put after this, if you add this bleaching agents like zinc formaldehyde or sodium hydrophosphate, it converts it into a whitish color. It looks more like sugar than jaggery. Then to provide the golden color, they add this yellow color or methanol yellow, which is not at all a food grade color. It's an azoda, it's a carcinogenic material, which is also very commonly used in jaggery. And these adulterants not just part of some spurious version or which is away, because we feel we are always safe from this. If you go for a lighter colored jaggery from market, 99% it will contain one among the three materials. So even if you have a facility to test jaggery, next time when you're buying it for your home, make sure that you buy a darker color, black color jaggery, which is less priced than the golden colored jaggery. So that is about jaggery, because I am not going to extensive details of any of this because our time is restricted. Then comes oils, another major raw material which we use irrespective of the formula as base is oil. Most commonly used oil you can use, is tilathaila or sesame oil. We also use coconut oil, mustard oil, castor oil as per formula. So oil, India is an importer of edible oil. I don't know how far you are aware about that, because our total domestic availability of oil is much less compared to the consumption. Because as you can see in the slide, the total production is only 25.3 million ton, whereas we imported 148.2 lakh ton of edible oil to India. So any material, when the consumption is more than production, when the demand is more than production, naturally there is a chance of adulteration. Because whatever oil you are consuming, you can see what percentage of that imported from outside. It is not manufactured in our place. So obviously chance of adulteration is there. So this is a data from Consumer Voice. It's an independent organization, consumer right organization from New Delhi, which they published in 2016. Here you can see the total number of samples tested in each of these materials, and how many of that samples failed. They collected the samples from 15 states of India, including Karnataka, and it was supposed for testing. You can see one out of 149 samples of coconut oil tested, 126 samples failed in quality because it was containing adulterants. 37 out of 50 samples of sesame oil failed. 89 out of 124 samples failed. That is more than 70% of these commonly used oils in Ayurveda industry failed in their testing. And it was collected from 15 different states of India and inclusive of Karnataka. So that shows how serious adulteration is. Because even if in our institution also, if we test 10 samples, 9 of it fails. Only one we may get without these problems. So you'll just see what are the major additives in that. One major problem, as you know, that mixing of low priced oils. At least mixing of low priced oil, if it is a natural oil, it doesn't cause any health hazard. Like normally in sesame oil, they mix groundnut oil. Okay, mix groundnut oil. Groundnut oil won't give you the therapeutic benefit of sesame oil, but at least it won't harm you. But another serious adulterants are argemone oil and mineral oil. Argemone oil is found admixed with sesame oil and mustard oil. Mostly admixed with sesame oil and mustard oil. Argemone oil, many times people who come from Maharashtra, you may be aware about a condition of an epidemic dropsy, which was reported in Maharashtra due to the mixing of argemone oil in edible oil. Many times the mixing of argemone oil is not intentional also, it is an accidental source, because argemone grows in the field of mustard and sesame, and the argemone seeds look very similar to mustard seeds. So at the time of harvesting, this unintentionally it gets mixed with the sesame oil or sesame or mustard, and it oil is mixed along with the oil. And argemone oil is a serious neurotoxin. So suppose if you are using a sesame oil mixed with argemone oil for doing a Vasti procedure in a patient with neurological disorder, you may be doing more harm to the patient than benefit just because of the oil you are using. So these things, the presence of argemone can be very easily detected in a laboratory. And another thing is mineral oil. Mineral oil, you all may be familiar what it is, because we normally call it mineral oil and we technically call it liquid paraffin. The paraffin wax, which you see in it's a petroleum product. Likewise, liquid paraffin, liquid form of that paraffin wax, which is obtained as a petroleum product, is the mineral oil. And it is very cheap in market. If you buy it bulk 1 liter, you sometimes you will get it for less than 15 rupees. So mixing mineral oil is a serious adulteration. We have seen mineral oil in many samples which we have tested here, and it is like it is a carcinogenic product also if you consume it internally. See, if you do it, if you consume, if you can use it for cosmetic. It is an approved cosmetic because most of the cosmetics which you use contains the mineral oil or liquid paraffin base, and many non-sticky oils which you buy as cosmetics, like which is available in oil, which you can see as advertised as non-sticky oils, has an equal mixture of mineral oil in that. Because as a cosmetic, there is no ban on that. It is still safe, you can use that. But the same material, if it is consumed, if it is ingested, it's a carcinogen, and it is, see, it can cause serious side effects. So many sesame oil samples and coconut oil samples which we got were mixed with mineral oils in that. And that also can be detected easily in the laboratory. I'm not going to the detection methods and all, then it will become very elaborate. Then the third thing is, you may have heard about that in ghee, mixing of animal fat in ghee. The body fat of cows or buffaloes are, after slaughtering, that fat is removed and that fat is added to ghee as an adulterant. That and also which can also be detected easily with a laboratory test. But these adulterants like argemone oil and mineral oil can cause serious health hazards to consumers. So this we have already discussed. The current issues with the adulteration is, one thing is the admixing of cold press oil with refined oil. All of you have heard about in advertisements refined oils. 10 years back, we thought that refined oils are better. Refined oils were considered superior. But during the process of refining, I'm not going to the details of the process. During the process of refining, trans fat is generated in the oil, which is considered as hazardous to the health. So that is why now there is a lot of demand for virgin oils and cold press oils. But many of the market samples which you get in the name of virgin oil has a mixture of refined oil in that. It won't be completely refined oil, but up to 50% mixture of refined oil will be there in that. Then mustard oil and sesame oil with argemone oil we already discussed. Then high price adulteration with low price oil we discussed. Yes, then loose edible oils are more susceptible to adulteration, because if a branded oil, if you buy, if some problem happens, you can file a case against the company or you can file a complaint in the consumer court. But loose oils, you don't even know from where the supply comes. Even the seller don't know from where it comes. So always chance of adulteration is more with loose oils. But our personal experience is that we have seen adulteration of argemone oil or similar material, even branded oil which we procured locally. Since I don't like to announce like which all brands and all in a technical session, but yes, it is there, it is adulterated. So then moving on to the problems, argemone oil mixed with edible oil causes epidemic dropsy that we discussed, glaucoma and loss of eyesight, which is proven scientifically. Edible oils adulterated with castor oil can cause stomach problems. Edible oils adulterated with mineral oil can cause damage to liver and carcinogenic effects. Edible oil adulterants with argemone oil and butter yellow is considered as etiological factors for gallbladder cancer. So these are some proven problems with edible oil. So for a normal customer, if you're buying an oil for your home, there is no way you can know whether it's adulterated. Jaggery, at least you get some idea with the color. But oils, yes, the smell, organoleptic features you can check, but sometimes it will be masked very well. You won't be able to detect it. Once in a while, if you are suspecting an oil, you can give it to a nearby laboratory, because in a laboratory, it can be very easily detected with some simple test. We can do that. But again, the problem is how far practical it is when you're buying it for your house. So one thing you keep it in mind, nothing, you won't get anything for free. So always check the cost of oils. Like if, for example, if you take sesame oil, you can see a wide range of sesame oils in market. Per liter, you will get it at 85 rupees. Per liter, you will get it at 300 rupees. Both are available in market, or maybe more than that. See, 1 kg of sesame cost 160 rupees in market. So if you take 1 kg of sesame, you hardly get half liter of oil from that. Then how a person is able to sell 1 liter of sesame oil at 85 rupees. So always keep that mathematics in your mind when you do something. Don't go for very cheaper versions, especially for preparation of medicines or your for home use or internal, especially when you are using it for an internal use. So keep that in mind. If you have doubt, approach a local laboratory and get it tested. There is no harm in that. Then another important raw material which we use very commonly, which we prescribe along with medicines, is honey, which is being contaminated. Honey adulteration is so extensive. It's such a developed industry that many a times it is not even detectable whether honey is adulterated or not. If you log into YouTube and all to check how, and if you just search how to check the purity of honey, you will come across n number of tests. Not even one of that is reliable. If you do that test, it won't tell you whether the honey is adulterated or not. Mostly what those tests check is whether the honey is mixed with water or not, whether the honey is adulterated with water. If water is like you should have seen keeping it in blotting paper, pouring it in a glass of water and seeing whether the thread moves like that. All this only tells you whether the honey has water mixed with that. And water is the safest adulterant for honey. Nothing will happen to you if you consume some honey which is mixed with water. But there are many other dangerous materials which is there in honey which cannot be detected in these tests. And in fact, in honey also we tested almost all the major brands in our laboratory, and unfortunately none of them passed the recommended quality parameters. So honey adulteration can be of two types. It can be a direct adulteration or indirect adulteration. Direct adulteration means mixing a substance, mixing an adulterant directly to honey, like adding sugar syrup, jaggery solution, invert sugar, anything like that. So that you can detect in a laboratory to an extent. Whereas there is an indirect adulteration for honey, which happens when honeybee is fed with adulterated substances. Instead of feeding them with floral honey, instead of keeping them near flowers, the honeybee itself is fed with adulterated materials. Then such indirect adulteration is extremely difficult to detect, and you need very high sophisticated instruments for that. And there is no regular test which you see online will be able to detect such adulteration. Then another thing which can deteriorate the quality of honey is overheating, because many of the commercial honey which you get in market is pasteurized so that the honey won't crystallize later. Otherwise, if you have bought honey from local vendors, you would have seen that after some days the honey starts to crystallize in the bottom of the vessel. But most of the commercial honey which you buy, it won't crystallize. It is because it undergoes a process of pasteurization, and that heating, as in our classical Samhita says, heating honey generates poison, and the poison is hydroxymethyl furfural or HMF. Up to 50 degrees Celsius, it's fine. 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, it's fine. But above that temperature generated, which in elevated concentration is harmful to the body. So HMF is one common ingredient which we test in laboratory when we check for the adulteration of honey. And it is a good indicator of honey adulteration, which is prepared with invert sugar. So invert sugar means you all know that honey is not exclusively sucrose. The honeybee convert the sucrose into glucose and fructose using its salivary enzymes. So likewise, artificially, sucrose with the help of acid hydrolysis is converted to glucose and fructose. Some flavor is mixed to that, and it is marketed as honey. So to detect such honey prepared like that, we check for the presence of hydroxymethyl furfural. And even sometimes if the honey is stored in very high temperature, that may increase the HMF content in honey. Sometimes when you demand for quality of honey, they experience like that, the vendor will tell you, madam, you please give the quality specification of honey, we will provide you honey like that. So that is the industry behind honey. So honey, even in spite of laboratory test, we can't be 100% sure honey is good. The only way is if you know the source, buy from there. If you have a source where you know from where the honey is collected, buy from that. Don't go for any brand name or any advertisement. Most of the samples which is available in market is spurious. It is better you don't use honey in your practice. But if you're using honey, make sure you are using good quality. Otherwise, it is creating more harm than good. So that is the major materials, so which we commonly use. Now we will move on to the herbals. Herbals, to an extent we know that there are issues, so we will move on to the herbals now. So Ayurvedic formulations, 80% of them are botanicals. But does the entire demand for Ayurvedic medicines come from Ayurvedic industry or from somewhere else? How so much of requirement for herbs is there? Because compared to the modern industry, Ayurvedic industry is very small in terms of turnover. So you can see different terms like traditional medicine, herbal medicine, medicines derived from natural sources. See, traditional medicine means, sorry, traditional medicine which covers Ayurveda, Unani, Chinese medicine, so Korean medicine, etc., comes under the stream of traditional medicine. Herbal medicine means it need not have the background of a traditional system. Any herb which has some benefits, which is converted to a medicine, becomes a herbal medicine. Like many herbal supplements which is available in market comes under the category of herbal medicine. Whereas there is a third category, medicines derived from natural sources. It is almost same as the contemporary allopathic medicine that is existing in market. They focus on certain molecules of a drug, like the development of reserpine from serpentina. Certain molecules are developed and those molecules are used for practice. But the difference is those come from a natural source. And now natural products have been a major source of successful pharmaceutical drug. About one half of the new drugs which is developed comes from natural products, unlike chemicals, because we humans have an evolutionary adaptation for natural products. And that evolutionary adaptation is the advantage of traditional medicine over the contemporary medicine, over the chemicals which we are using nowadays. How it is like that? We have evolved along with nature. I'm not telling just about humans. From the time of invertebrates, as animals has evolved always with plants. So from that time, from the time of evolution, from the beginning of evolution, we have been feeding on plants, microbes, fungi, which evolved along with us. So when an animal consumes these materials, if the material which is consumed by an animal has got some plus point or some positivity with the animal system, then the nature will automatically adapt to that. The body will automatically adapt to that. So whichever genes get adapted to that, only those genes will survive in the gene pool. Other things may get eliminated in the gene pool. So likewise, for every natural material, we have an evolutionary adaptation. And that is the advantage. That is why our body responds well with traditional medicine. And that is why traditional medicine is safe for us. Traditional food is safe for us because we have evolved along with those food items. So the same like when we come across a case of lactose intolerance, I'm not going to the details. You know that many foreign population complain about lactose intolerance, whereas in India we see very less incidents of lactose intolerance compared to the foreign population. As like sometimes it is there. I'm not telling lactose intolerance is not there. But I associated with conditions like IBS, it is there. We have seen that. But the difference is the Indian population has evolved for a long time along with animals. We have been domesticated. We are one of the earliest tribe who has domesticated these animals, and we have been consuming dairy products for many generations, and our genes are adapted to that. The natural mechanism is lactose intolerance. Normally, humans are not tolerant to lactose after infancy, but our populations are more susceptible to that because we have evolved through many generations after getting exposed to that. So similarly, we have an evolutionary adaptation for natural products also. So this difference, because of this, 80% of the biomolecules which is evolved from natural materials, they are easily assimilated by the body. They are similar to the materials in our body, whereas biomolecules in our body. Whereas if you screen the chemical medicine, the resemblance is only 0.8 to 0.9%. So that is why more and more drugs are developed from natural medicine. Along with that, the traditional medicine scheme is there. Many other streams are there. All this create a huge demand for herbs. And from where do we get this? Like we have around 7,000 species of plants, and out of that, 1,200 species are actively traded in India. And the total commercial demand, as you can see in this slide, is around 512,000 tons in 2017, where which is that is only for India, only for Indian market. The world demand as per WHO is 14 times of that, and in the next few years, it will become almost every year it will become up to 25% more. So that is, I'm just showing the statistics only to show you the extent, the only to show you how the extent of the demand for that herbs. So where are our sources? See, we have a lot of, like, out of the 34 biodiversity hotspots recognized throughout the world, we have two major hotspots, the Eastern Himalayas and the Western Ghats. And we have a lot of different ecosystems throughout India because we have a different climatic conditions, different geographic areas, and different ecosystem. See, out of this, 90% of this biodiversity comes from forest area only. Out of what we told, 90% of this medicinal plant comes from forest. Only 10% is restricted to other areas. So the genetic diversity of medicinal plants in the world is getting endangered in an alarming rate because one is this demand and over harvesting, and there is no restriction on the harvesting practices. We are doing it with no regard to the future because it's a completely unorganized structure. It's not a problem with everyone. It is a completely unorganized structure. That is a problem, unorganized sector. So yeah, you know about the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, and they categorizes plants into these categories through details. So out of the total medicinal plants which we are using, a total of 560 plant species in India is included in IUCN Red List. And out of that, 247 species are a threatened category. These are some common medicinal plants which we use. The formulas you are familiar with: Bilwa, Bacha, Jyotishmati, Yashtimatu, Katuki, Kiratatikta, Guduji, Meshasrangi. And in the right side, you can see the annual requirement in India. It is not the global requirement, it is the annual requirement of in India as per the data provided by the National Medicinal Plant Board. It is 2,000 to 5,000 metric ton for Bilwa, and likewise you can see each and every material. So this is our consumption in spite of being an endangered plant. And in 2015, the list was again upgraded and 18 plants were categorized as critically endangered species. A few are categorized as critically endangered species. I'm not going through all the detail, just tell you a few of them. Vasanaba. You know how extensively we use Vasanaba in our products. It is a critically endangered species whose trade is restricted by law. Export is restricted by law, and it has, but still we have an annual requirement of 50 to 100 metric ton. Kushta. Next time, think twice before using Kottam Chukkadi Taila or Kottam Chukkadi Lepa Churna, whether it is really necessary or not, because it is also critically endangered plant whose trade is, export is illegal. Jadamamsi, the Jadamayadi Churna which we use, a critically endangered plant, with a requirement of 500 to 1,000 metric ton every year. Gokshura, which we use annually 2,000 to 5,000 metric ton, another critically endangered plant. See, and above all, Gugulu. I don't know how many Ayurvedic practitioners can think of a practice without Gugulu. That is also a critically endangered species whose trade is banned. A Gugulu Bachao Abhayan is being launched to save Gugulu. Because from the mature tree of Gugulu, you can get 250 to 500 gram of Gugulu gum during the extraction season. And if you buy it from, because mostly the Gugulu come from Pakistan, even if you buy it from source, like from where it is imported in India, it is very expensive, 1,900 to 2,000 rupees it will cost per kg. Still, if you go to the local market, you will get Gugulu from 700 to 800 rupees. So I don't need to explain more what is in that. You will get Shuddha Gugulu, in fact, because when you do Shodhana, you won't get that much of feel. In fact, you will get Shuddha Gugulu at 700 to 800. And many times, even the paint raisins, the raisins which we mix in paint, is being mixed to Gugulu. The percentage and all we don't know. Some Gugulu will be there. So if you test it in the laboratory also, you can see some amount of that. So what are the possible solutions? So first and foremost thing is, will be ending in 3 minutes. So I'll just conclude it. So the cost of, first thing that comes to our mind will be cultivation. But the cost of cultivation, because now I told you 90% of this material exists in the forest. Whoever is buying that, they go into the forest, they collect the material, That is the only effort they put in that, and they sell it in market. So in spite of being critically endangered, many of these species are not very expensive. Some materials like gugulu are expensive, but other things like billo and all, compared to the availability, it is not very expensive. So if a farmer goes into cultivation, he doesn't have any buyback guarantee, because if I buy a material which is available in market for 30 rupees, for 4 or 5 times that cost, then automatically that cost will get added up to the product. Then again it won't be, the manufacturer won't be able to sell the product. Another thing is use of fertilizers and pesticides. Excessive use of fertilizers and pesticides, it won't have any quality of what you get from the forest area. I'm not going to the details of that. If you have any queries, we will discuss into one session if needed, and we will discuss it there. Then majority of the plants are not amenable for vegetable propagation. Many things can't be cultivated. Even though growing from seeds, still it is not possible to cultivate it. But other options are sustainable harvesting, harvest it without damaging the plant, substitute with different parts of the same plant. If you are using the root, if that is the accessible part, we have to do our research on that, whether we can substitute it with some other part, like a leaf or stem or some other part. Then if any regional substitute is available, whether it can be replaced. Then distinguish surplus adulterants from substituents. And above all, as doctors, shift to new formulations, because we are become habituated to formulations like containing the shamola, ashoka and all. But it is like the animal products like Sringabasma and all, in next 10 or 15 years, it will be finished. So please make sure you shift to new formulations, and that is the awareness we want to create among doctors. I'm not going of products, because again it will take a lot of time. So why I want to discuss in a platform of doctors is, each and every one of us is try a small act from your part, when multiplied by billions of people, can transform the world. So thank you so much. So thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you so much for being with me. So with this, I come to the end of my session. I have tried to incorporate some information with the limited amount of time, and we are trying to do it from our part as a group. So if we can create this awareness, and each and every one of us can do some input on that, some inputs in our practice, then to an extent we will be able to solve it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sir, I think with this we can
Thank
end the
you,
session.
madam.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Divya, for your excellent and thought-provoking presentation. I think there is not much time for us now. Thanks,
Yes, sir.
I thank everybody for joining us and patronizing us. We expect your support in coming sessions also. See you soon with the new interesting sessions in webinar. Once again, thanking Dr. Divya for your excellent